you lazy creature. While you were sleeping, I finished my greatest creation, the Collector.
Okay. Hi everybody, my name is Tommy Garvey, and I am a collector.
I thought it was gonna be He-Man.
There are a lot of videos on YouTube that'll list off the rarest Masters of the Universe figures for you, but what's in this box will not appear on any of those lists. There are a lot of articles online that'll tell you these are the toys you had as a kid that are super rare and they'll make you rich now. You didn't have what's in this box as a kid, because it's one of a kind. When I say that it is the holy grail of MOTU collecting, probably the rarest and most expensive action figure you could hope to buy in terms of He-Man, that is precisely what I mean, without hyperbole or exaggeration. It is top of the mountain. It is much rarer than any Wonder Bread He-Man or Sealed Eternia playset, Titus and Megator, the Leo Toys Faker that was only released in India. In terms of He-Man action figures, this has the power. Before we actually open this box, it might help to take a minute to discuss the history of the Masters of the Universe line itself and how it came to be, because that'll give us a much better understanding of what's in this box and why it's so important and rare. It'll take us a couple minutes to get back to the opening, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. Since this is my first Masters of the Universe video on the channel, I'll take a second to introduce myself to collectors who might not know me. My name is Tommy Garvey. I've collected vintage Star Wars prototypes for almost 30 years now. But He-Man and I have been through a lot together over the years. As a millennial kid, I missed the glory days of the cartoon. I really don't remember watching it all that much as a kid. And by the time I was old enough to play with the toys, they were disappearing from store shelves. But still, the power of the brand was such that some of my earliest memories are of playing with He-Man toys. Growing up, he was my idol and ultimate career goal, but that didn't work out. So rather than going into the competitive field of swords and sorcery, adventuring, fighting skeleton men on futuristic yet strangely medieval planets, I've collected prototypes for almost 30 years. And not to flex on all of you, but when I was 5, Shiva visited my local toy store and personally certified that I was an official Princess of Power. So I've got that going for me. Anyway, let's get to our story so we can finally open the box, because I'm getting anxious. Way back before the new He-Man TV show.
I have the power?
And the other TV show.
I have the power!
The reboot TV show. And the sequel TV show.
By the power of Eternia, I have the power!
And the live-action movie. And the spin-off TV show.
For the honor of Grail!
And the original TV show. And the action figure line.
Here's He-Man, Skeletor, and Castle Grayskull. You have to put the castle together.
You're doomed, He-Man.
Oh, yeah? Watch this action, Dad. Now I have the power.
They were simply a toy company looking for a hero. In 1980, Mattel was in trouble, and it would take the most powerful man in the universe to get them out of it. Their Barbie and Hot Wheels lines were still doing well, but Star Wars figures were utterly destroying any boys' action figure line they released. Big Jim had been a failure for them, as had Clash of the Titans, Battlestar Galactica, and Flash Gordon. Their longtime rival, Kenner, whose unofficial internal motto was, "To hell with Mattel," had the Star Wars license, and they were strangling Mattel's boys' toys department with it. Mattel had been offered the brand before the movie's release, and they turned it down, something the company now deeply regretted. With that in mind, Mattel decided that a new strategy was necessary. They would create a brand in-house rather than relying on an outside licensed franchise. This would allow them greater control over it, ensuring that they wouldn't have to pay royalties for whatever they produced, and that it would be on the market longer than the typical movie tie-in window. If the line failed, it would be because the toys weren't popular, not because the movie wasn't. This strategy ultimately leads to Masters of the Universe and What's in This Box. Now, who created He-Man is a controversial issue, both in the company and out, and is literally the subject of its own documentary film. It's been debated almost since the moment the line was born, with claim belonging primarily to two men, and rather than giving one man sole credit for the character, I think it would be easier to just say that they both made contributions, and to give one sole credit would be to dismiss the other. As such, I will treat the Mattel team as a team, and make no ultimate judgments on the issue, because frankly, it just doesn't really matter to our story. Both men were involved with What's in This Box, and that's good enough for me. In any case, sometime in May 1980, Mattel did a research study to find out what genres interested children. They discovered that fantasy, military, and space were the most popular themes that little boys would most want to play with. Using that information, Mattel preliminary designer Roger Sweet came up with a toy pitch to give his bosses during a December 18, 1980 meeting. Sweet was a longtime fan of bodybuilding and muscle culture, and he had felt bullied as a child. Those memories stuck with him into adulthood, and he imagined an action figure line featuring a hugely muscled protagonist, someone whom no one would ever push around. He wanted more dynamic poses for the figure, some kind of action punching feature, and he wanted removable plastic accessories. This plastic manly man would be capable of wearing different outfits and disguises, perhaps even traveling to different time periods, but he would remain the same burly mountain of a man underneath.
The power to make these kids know exactly who he is. 4-year-old Brian knows.
He-Man?
Basically, the figure would essentially be another Big Jim or Barbie kind of line, which would feature changeable outfits and situations based on whatever mood struck the child at the time. Sweet, with help on costume details from Mattel artist Mark Taylor, constructed 3 9.5-inch tall models to showcase his proposal for a line, using Mattel's Big Jim figure as a base. Basically, Sweet took a toy Mattel had already released and made it a rough estimation of something new, a process called kit bashing. It took him 180 hours to complete his mock-ups, and he decided that his line would need a memorable name, something short and punchy.
Tough guy, terrific guy, all kinds of different names.
He ran through several options before a name popped into his head as if from the heavens, accompanied by a sound effect that Sweet loves to use when recounting the tale. The name he decided to call the line was He-Man.
But the instant I got that He-Man name, bong, a giant bell went off in my head.
Using the data from child research, Sweet gave the character 3 different outfits: a military outfit, a space outfit, and a barbarian outfit. This would allow the line to hit all 3 desired genres at once. Sweet's bosses weren't impressed with the military or space outfits, but they liked the barbarian one. Sweet sometimes refers to this character as simply the Barbarian Guy in interviews, and Mattel's VP of Marketing, Paul Cleveland, refers to him as a Viking Guy, but Masters of the Universe fans now call him Vikron. Like Walt Disney's Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, serving as a prototype for Mickey Mouse in terms of look and overall design, Vikron represents an early inspiration for a character who would later surpass him. Vikron is not He-Man, but He-Man is built upon this Viking's burly shoulders. Mattel approved Sweet's concept, but not as a character who sometimes dressed up in Frazetta cosplay on weekends. They wanted a new character who would actually be a barbarian. Basically, a child-friendly Conan. Sweet decided to recycle the name for his line, but apply it to just one of his concepts. They would no longer be the He-Man Trio. From this point on, the line would focus exclusively on a barbarian character, and he would be the only one known as He-Man. It was just a matter of deciding what He-Man would actually look like. Sweet basically started from scratch and wanted a new look for his new character. Mattel artist Mark Taylor was asked to come up with more drawings of He-Man and other characters who could be included in the line. Taylor had been drawing fantasy heroes since 1954, including many that looked very similar to He-Man. He had been greatly influenced by Hal Foster, creator of Prince Valiant, and Taylor was so fascinated with his style and with the traditional hero's journey format that he had been creating fantasy art for years and putting it up on the walls of his office at Mattel. Since this new line was going to have a Frazetta, Conan aesthetic, and he had already done some of the design work on the 9.5-inch tall models, Taylor was obviously the perfect man for the job. He quickly created many of the classic characters and environments the Masters of the Universe franchise is known for, including Teela, Man-at-Arms, Castle Grayskull, which he called the Dwell of Souls, and Skeletor. In terms of designing the Masters of the Universe world, no one had a bigger impact than Mark Taylor. Sweet took the 9.5-inch tall kit-bashed models to see Mattel master sculptor Tony Guerrero, along with some books on bodybuilding and presumably some of Taylor's initial concept sketches for He-Man. For legal reasons, I'm sure Mattel would also deny using Frazetta's Conan as an inspiration, particularly this image, so we'll all just pretend it's a coincidence. Sweet wasn't looking for a copy of a Big Jim figure this time. He wanted something that no one had ever seen before. He wanted a new character, realized in a completely new style. He told Guerrero that the figure needed to make Schwarzenegger look like a wimp. The sculptor looked over the rough Big Jim mock-ups from Sweet's original idea for the line, and then apparently threw them away. Vikron was not needed anymore. Mattel wanted He-Man. Incidentally, Mattel would actually release a Vikron figure in 2012, along with all three of his outfits. It's a really neat set. I don't own it. Guerrero's boss reportedly didn't even want him working on He-Man, because it wasn't going anywhere, and instead wanted him working exclusively on Barbie. But Guerrero wanted in on the project anyway. His plan for the new figure was rather revolutionary and ran counter to normal procedure in the industry at the time. Rather than sculpting the figure itself, he would work up a prototype model of the figure, showing what it might look like. Taylor recalls this moment as, "We thought, for the first time, let's do one-to-one. Tony Guerrero turned out these little figures, 1-to-1, and he said this to me, let's do it as we really want it to look like. And then we'll work out the different shrinkage for the different materials, the rotocast heads, the injection molded bodies." This one-piece model would be the same size as the production toy, and it would let them test to see if He-Man worked as a design, and then let them make changes to this concept more easily than if they were forced to try altering the final sculpt itself. It would be, in a sense, a stand-in. He-Man's stunt double. So Guerrero got to sculpting He-Man for the very first time. Cleveland relates that, "I remember going into Tony Guerrero's cubicle and saying, 'More muscles, bigger muscles, more muscles,' and him saying, 'It's not going to look real.' I said, 'Think Schwarzenegger times 2. And he just made it huge, huge, huge." Guerrero did just that, trying to create the barbarian that Sweet and Cleveland were looking for. Guerrero tried 4 different clay sculpts searching for the right look for the character, but they were all discarded. None of them was He-Man. The 5th sculpt was perfect though, exactly what the team was looking for. Guerrero then made a handful of resin copies of it, something collectors call hard copies, and which Taylor calls slugs. A hard copy is exactly what it sounds like. It is a hard copy of the original sculpt. It's created by hand. Typically, hard copies are used to create the final steel molds which produce the toys sent to stores, but in this case that would not be needed. The hard copy was a conceptual piece, and the model would not be needed for tooling since no actual plastic toys were going to be created from it. Instead, the designers simply needed something they could handle and work with, and although fragile, the hard copy would be much more resilient than the clay sculpt itself. Many collectors are probably familiar with first shot prototypes, or test shot prototypes. They are products of the steel molds. They are the first time plastic is put into the steel mold, producing a production quality figure. A hard copy is the figure that makes the steel molds, which make the test shots. Hard copies are entirely handmade. They are hand assembled using silicone molds. They are copies of the original sculpt, and test shots are essentially plastic copies of the hard copy. This hard copy model was then shown to Sweet, who was very impressed with it. According to Sweet, Guerrero had created a model that made the character come alive. His vision was a revolutionary departure from any male action figure that had come before. Every muscle was bulging and ripped. There were muscles where no muscles had ever existed. Muscle on top of glorious muscle. Tony's He-Man was totally buff from toe to fingertip. The guy actually looked like the strongest man in the universe. Taylor was equally impressed with all of Guerrero's work on the line, saying, as long as my friend Tony Guerrero was sculpting them, they were all perfect. And that, when he did all of the figures, he did them better than my B-sheets. When he did them, he took them even a step further. Sometimes I'd look at it and be like, holy mackerel, that's better than my B-sheet. He-Man was a little more complex than designing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I had the wonderful sculpture by Tony Guerrero. In an interview with the Battle Ram blog, Mattel designer Martin Arriola put it more succinctly, saying, Tony sculpted the He-Man. As a side note, Guerrero reportedly sculpted the first Tila figure entirely nude, and then added the armor later. That has absolutely nothing to do with our story today. I just find it amusing. Guerrero passed away in 2012, leaving behind a legacy of work ranging from He-Man to reportedly doing a lot of the sculpting for the Barbie doll when it was first released. His impact on popular culture will outlast us all, which is perhaps the greatest thing you can say about an artist. The team quickly broke the conceptual hard copies Guerrero had carefully created, because designing the world of Eternia was tough business. They snapped the arms and legs off the models, trying to see the kinds of stress points the figures had, and how well they'd fit into the vehicles planned for the line, that kind of thing. Once broken, the figures were apparently discarded. One hard copy seems to have been saved from this sad fate, though, and it survived the initial testing period unscathed. It became the primary stand-in for the final figure going forward, the first He-Man, battle-tested and strong. Sweet eventually painted the surviving model, and then handed it over to Mattel's child testing department so that they could get the opinion of actual children about the new line and character. Sweet joined Taylor and others behind a one-way mirror in the department, secretly observing and taking notes as the outside world was first introduced to He-Man. The testing was technically illegal, but it was the 80s, so no one cared. No pictures or video of the testing have ever surfaced, but I imagine it like this.
All right, thanks for participating in our focus group, kids. Today, we're going to show you some itchy and scratchy cartoons.
Cool!
We want you to tell us what you think, and be honest, because no one from the show is here spying on you.
Why is that mirror sneezing?
Look, it's just an old creaky mirror. You know, sometimes it sounds a little like it's sneezing or coughing or talking softly.
As Taylor remembers, the intern pulled back the black cloth which covered the toy prototypes, revealing He-Man and mock-ups of the other proposed figures in the line. The figures were magnificent sculpts done by Tony Guerrero, but they were solid epoxy slugs and were very unstable due to the wide, dramatic, and comic book-inspired stance, coupled with the slug's high center of balance. It was Guerrero's painted sculpts that drove these kids crazy, and crazy is what it was. There was no keeping their hands off now, as the kids tried to weapon them up and do battle with each other, even though there was no articulation, grip, or removable armor. Then the real drama began to unfold as we watched our players craft their plan. Almost as soon as the intern left the room, the rascal with He-Man unzipped his bomber jacket, stuffed the figure inside, and made a shushing gesture to his buddy across the table. The intern returned and divested the boys of their loot. At the end of testing, our product looked like it had been tumble-dried with bricks. The director of child testing said, "Gentlemen, I think you've got a major hit." From the time I saw that child test and saw that little kid try to steal my product, man, I was feeling good. This attempted theft of the He-Man model is often cited in interviews by members of the design team who were in the observation room at the time, particularly Taylor. Honestly, the Mattel people seem genuinely proud of it. Personally, it's one of my favorite pieces of early lore about the creation of the franchise. It reminds me of that Simpsons episode.
Oh, man, I gotta get me one of those.
Hey, I'm not waiting till the store opens.
Wow, only 22 seconds from muttering to door smash.
That projects to a profit of $370 million.
I'd still sleep a little easier if I saw some trampling.
Ow! Now, why would you wear cleats to a store?
The one-piece He-Man model was then returned to Mattel's design department, where it was apparently repaired and touched up, returning to use as a mock-up. Guerrero used the suggestions the team had received about the prototype to help him complete the final He-Man sculpt. Mark Ellis from Mattel Marketing explains that preliminary design did the original figure for the theme test, one of which was the Barbarian. After the research came back on the theme, we began work on developing the line. Engineering and the art departments took over the development of the characters. Each character was modified a few times, each time being a little less barbarian, and finally what was produced. Most notably, He-Man's hair went from brown to blonde, and he lost his then signature Viking helmet. Mattel's child testing had reported that younger children wanted to be able to easily tell the difference between heroic characters and villainous ones, so despite the fact that He-Man's Viking helmet had been with him almost since the beginning, it was dropped. One assumes because it resembled evil horns. The Viking helmet design came so close to being released, though, that it is actually sculpted into the final Castle Grayskull toy itself. And whether you noticed it or not, the helmet also literally appears in every single episode of the Filmation cartoon, as it is featured on the exterior of the Castle Grayskull drawbridge. After the final sculpt was finished and new multi-piece hard copies were created, the early one-piece prototype model of the figure was no longer needed. At that point, it was given to Roger Sweet as a memento of his work on the line, and no one thought about it again. Sweet held on to it for decades, and then ended up selling it to a prominent private collector in the early 2000s. That collector shared it with the Power and Honor Foundation years later, who published a catalog on the history of Masters of the Universe art in 2011. The book showcases the prototype model in a 2-page spread, saying that the significance of this piece to He-Man's history cannot be underestimated. It was exhibited in the Mattel booth at the first PowerCon convention in 2011 in a place of honor. The model appeared in a deleted scene of Netflix's The Toys That Made Us documentary in 2018. And eventually, its owner decided that it was time for the model to have new adventures, and he was kind enough to sell it to me. So, at long last, that is what is in this box. Literally the first He-Man toy ever. Not a reissue or a custom or a fake, the actual prototype figure from 1981. The one Roger Sweet wanted to be so muscular that he'd make Schwarzenegger look like a wimp. The one that was handmade by master sculptor Tony Guerrero, first establishing the revolutionary look and feel of the line. according to Mark Taylor, the exact figure that he watched that kid in the bomber jacket try to steal right out of the Mattel offices in 1981 during child testing. This model, and the sculpt which created it, are not only the first physical representations of He-Man ever, but are also the birthplace of the entire multi-billion-dollar Masters of the Universe franchise. The movies, TV shows, spin-offs, reboots, toys, comics, clothing, mall appearances, conventions, commercials, memes, that epic cake my mom baked me on my 5th birthday, all of it. It all began right here, with what's inside this cardboard box. I don't really like talking about the value of things in my collection. Not only do I find it obnoxious and horribly tacky when collectors do that, I also feel like it's utterly immaterial in a case like this. It cheapens it. You can't put a price on history. And I view this as artwork. This is handmade. It's hand-painted. It took countless hours of work and refinement. Artists and craftspeople at Mattel creating He-Man. So I don't really think about what it's worth any more than I'd walk into a museum and ask them for a price list. In this case, however, I recognize that this video will probably be watched by people who have no frame of reference for the prototype hobby, and they're probably curious. I certainly remember starting out as a prototype collector way back when, and I would try to get an estimate on what I could expect to pay for something, and at the time I found it frustrating that collectors never wanted to tell me. They always kept it secret. I felt excluded at the time. I felt like they must have felt like their collection was above mine or something. And I'm completely against anything, no matter the hobby, which makes it harder for new collectors to pick something up. So, I find the topic of prices deeply uncomfortable. But for the collectors asking, suffice to say that for what this cost me, I could have bought a nice Wonder Bread He-Man and a boxed Megator and Titus figures for him to hang out with, and then a boxed Eternia playset for them all to live in. For non-collectors, I would tell them that ultimately I had a choice between this and buying a classic car. I chose this. I'm not bragging, apologizing, or complaining for that. I am neither proud nor embarrassed about it. I'm simply telling you about a hobby that I love in the most matter-of-fact way that I can. I'm sure there are a lot of people wincing at paying big money for a toy, but like I said, I consider this art. I genuinely do. Works original concept sketches for Mickey Mouse are not doodles. The original art to Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, are not silly drawings from a funny book. To call this a toy is to call the Mona Lisa merely pigment smeared on canvas. I believe that things have value aside from what they actually are. So yeah, this is not a toy. This is a cultural relic. This is where He-Man first burst onto the scene as the friendly yet perpetually shirtless barbarian we all love. So I guess it's a toy, or more accurately, it's a handmade prototype representing of what would one day become a toy. But it's also a piece of our shared cultural heritage. And to me, that's a thing without price. It should be cherished so that future generations can discover the magic of Eternia on their own. Anyway, with all that in mind, let's open up this box and see if it got here in one piece. It could be that this video is going to have a really depressing twist ending, because I genuinely have not opened this box. I don't know if it got here. Okay, this is in fact a live opening. I am absolutely terrified. As you can see, I went with registered mail. It cost me $100. It took forever to get here, but I said I would rather wait and have it be safe. Let's open it up. Box got here okay. I don't see any damage, which is always good. One time I got a poster that had a tire track on it. The post office ran it over with a truck. time I ordered something, and the packing material was a guy's guilty plea for drunk driving. He had carefully wrapped the figure in his court proceedings. It was epic. Got another box. Final box. I don't hear any loose pieces, so I'm happy. So they did a really good job of packing this. Oh, I can see it. There we go. Wow. And it arrived without a scratch. Thank you, Postal Service. Isn't that amazing? I have my childhood He-Man here for comparison. You can see some slight differences. The model is heavy because it's a resin. It has no articulation at all. It's just a little model that stands there representing the line. It's hand painted and very fragile. That is.
To say that I am happy to have this would be an understatement, and I cannot express to you the amazement I feel that I actually own it. I've wanted this for years, back before I even knew it still existed. It is, to me at least, the best He-Man collectible that anyone could hope to ever possess. This is my holy grail from the line. I've collected prototypes for over 25 years, and this is one of the single coolest things I have ever seen. Let's get a closer look at him, because I think that's why you probably clicked on this video. So this is the prototype He-Man. This is the concept He-Man, sometimes called the Guerrero sculpt or Vikron, whatever you want to call him. The figure is about the same size as a production He-Man, as you can see. Its proportions are a little different though, and he's standing a little straighter. If you look, his feet are actually bare. They just have little painted boots on. It looks like he's wearing dress socks. Interestingly, in the first mini-comic, He-Man is introduced without boots as well. I don't know if these two facts are related, but it's a cool thing anyway. His bare feet make him look a little more caveman or something, which is cool. This is my childhood He-Man that I'm comparing him to. Don't judge me. The concept weighs considerably more than the production toy, probably 2 or 3 times as much. It's made of solid resin, which means he's heavy, hard, and fragile. You can see the surface is rougher than the production toy as well. This was a mock-up after all, not something that needed to be perfectly smooth. It just needed to be a representation of the kind of look they were going for. You can see all the work that Guerrero put into it. I've seen concept pieces from other lines that look like they were sculpted with a potato peeler, but this one is truly something special. It is hand-painted, and I think it really adds some character. To me, this is a figure that looks even better painted than it does unpainted. I like the little bits of metallic accent that have been added. It really gives some flash to the traditional He-Man outfit. To round out our toy review, I would say that the posability of this He-Man figure is terrible, though. 0 points of articulation. Mattel really dropped the ball on this one. Epic fail. The thing reminds me of one of those old school LJN wrestling figures, although I wouldn't recommend body slamming him, obviously. He will stand up on his own, but like Taylor said during child testing, it is rather top heavy, and given the fragile nature of the figure, I wouldn't recommend displaying it that way. All in all, I genuinely like this version of He-Man. To be honest, I probably like it more than the final one. I like his expression. The sculpt on the final figure has a complicated look to him, which could mean a variety of things depending on the play situation. But this one is much simpler. It's the face of determination he makes right before he cleaves someone in two with a battle axe. I enjoy his helmet. It immediately reads Conan the Barbarian to me. Since I'm a big fan of Conan, that's a good thing. I should also point out that Mattel is actually producing a He-Man figure wearing this helmet, which was announced at PowerCon 2021. Conceptual prototype He-Man gets a good review from me. So, thanks for joining me on the first
Holly's Retro Toy Spin.
And huge thanks to all the creators, collectors, and fans of Masters of the Universe, especially the ones who assisted me in completing this video. I do not claim to know everything about MOTU, so this has really been a labor of love for me, and I couldn't have done it without your help. In the future, I'd like to do more content like this on the channel, covering my other passions and collections. There are a ton of cool things out there to collect and appreciate, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. See you next time, Retro Tears!